Hey guys, what's up? I'm Shriniket and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So the Avenger 220, it's the original Avenger launched by Bajaj in the Indian market quite a long time back. And the Avenger 180 as well as the 160 are simply the derivatives of this bike. Today I have with me the BS6 compliant cruise version of the Avenger 220 with me. So let's check it out in detail.
Avenger feels just like a big capacity cruiser. A torquey engine, relaxed riding position and a low slung and stable stance. The recipe is just right. The 220cc engine delivers impressive torque in low as well as mid-range, providing some juicy acceleration. The top end is where it falls flat, as there is no point revving it to the red line. The lack of a tacho means you can accidentally hit the rev limiter while accelerating, although it is a matter of getting used to. The BS6 Avenger actually sounds better than the previous versions as it is quieter, but a lot more bassy, making it sound really sweet. Leaning the bike for a quick overtake is actually easier than its long wheelbase might suggest, which can be said about taking U-turns on this bike. What the long wheelbase provides and doesn't is straight line stability, as it stays arrow straight on highways. The suspension has been set up cleverly by Bajaj as the front forks are very soft with 130mm of travel. The forks absorb most of the bumps as hardly any of them are transmitted to the rider. The previous gen Avengers had rear shocks which were set up too softly, making for a bouncy ride and would bottom out with two on board. I am glad to report that the shocks have been cleverly tuned by Bajaj this time as they feel a bit stiff, not uncomfortably so, but they don't bottom out as easily and keep the bike well planted over rough tarmac. Brakes on the 220 just don't have enough oomph as they have been lifted straight from the 160. First of all, both the front and rears offer next to none feedback, lack in terms of bite and feel seriously spongy under heavy braking. Brakes require serious improvement on the Avengers, both the 160 and the 220. Another not so impressive aspect on the cruise is the windshield. At the bottom, it's nice and wide and provides adequate protection for your chest, but it just isn't tall enough to provide wind protection for your head as a serious amount of wind buffeting is felt on your helmet. The ground clearance is adequate as not once did I manage to scrape the bottom. Vibes are present throughout the rev range and get heavier as the revs climb. You can easily expect a mileage of around 30 to 35 kmpl in combined city and highway riding.
The cruise version of the 220 gets a lot of chrome bits all around the bike and spoke trims as standard along with a windshield which is not present on the street version of the 220. Although the engine on the 220 Cruise has been borrowed from the Pulsar 220, the power and torque output is slightly lower on the Avenger. So the Avenger in its BS6 form produces 18.7 PS of peak power and 17.5 Nm of peak torque. That might be due to the different tuning on the FI hardware on this Avenger. It also gets an additional catalytic converter just next to the engine, the O2 sensor being clearly visible from the opposite side, of course just like all the other BS6 bikes. Also a new feature and a really good feature in terms of safety is the side stand engine cutoff switch, which is a good addition. The 220 looks nice and retro in person as it gets a lot of chrome bits all around, especially the windshield, which is an attention grabber wherever you go. The chrome bits are present around the headlamp assembly, on the tank, the entire exhaust assembly as well as the rear grab rail and backrest assembly. Combine that with the spoke trims, it looks nice and retro. The one disappointing aspect on the 220 is the braking setup, because it borrows the same braking setup as the Avenger 160, which is quite disappointing. It gets the same 260mm disc up front and a 130mm trim at the rear with single channel ABS as standard, and with the addition of the power from the 220cc engine, I expected a bit more stopping power from these brakes. The tire size is exactly the same as the street version, the alloy wheel version. So it gets a 90 section tire up front with a 17-inch alloy. The 17-inch rim, and it gets a 15-inch rim at the rear with a 130 section tire at the rear, which are exactly the same as the 160 Avenger. The seating posture as well is exactly the same, although the handlebar is a bit higher compared to the 160 or even the street 220. The foot pegs as well are quite forward set. The cushioning being really soft for the rider as well as the pillion. The cushioning is quite thick, of course. The styling is really nice on the cruise version. The rear end especially looks very attractive with the tail lamp design. Instrument cluster on this cruise version is pretty unique, as it gets a full digital instrument cluster up top and a simple cluster on the tank, as you can see. So it gets all the telltale lights at the bottom with the Bajaj logo glowing in a nice blue shade. Up top it gets a used speedometer, a primary odometer with additional trip meters, a clock and a fuel gauge. That's all you get in terms of the information on the instrument cluster. The overall fit and finish is decent, although the switch gear looks like it has been lifted straight from the commuter segment of Bajaj bikes. That's a bit disappointing considering the cost of this bike. The windshield is nice and big, although it does vibrate a lot because the engine is not that refined compared to some of its competitors, which aren't many of course. That's pretty much it from my side. Special thanks to Pagariya Bajaj for providing me the Cruise 220 for review. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.